let us take this as an illustration of just one of those characteristics that we described in the previous slide. We had wealth and beauty, etc. Let's take the issue of wealth, and let's say in a person's life, he starts off with no wealth. And then there are numerous decisions that he can make in his life. And each decision is a crossroad in his life. And each decision results in certain consequences. And each of these consequences will open up new opportunities and new crossroads. So life is about making decisions, facing the consequences of those decisions, and then facing new decisions, and so on. And depending on the choices we make, we will go along any one of these routes and ending up at any one of these endpoints. And that is what would happen in our pursuit of beauty, in our pursuit of wealth, in our pursuit of knowledge. How do we bring together the concept of free will and predestiny? If God has already destined that we are going to achieve a certain thing, it means we can have no contribution. If God is going to test us, it means there has to be a contribution coming from our part. And I illustrate the amalgamation between predestiny and free will in terms of this diagram. What I'm illustrating is, let's say, for example, wealth. This is the total range of wealth that exists in the entire universe, from the absolute poor to the absolute wealthy, and a whole lot of range in between. God knows every single possible choice that we are going to face in our life. He knows every single possible decision that we would have to make. He knows every possible consequence of every single possible decision that we would be faced with. So he knows everything that we are going to be faced with, and every possible decision we can make, and every possible consequence of every possible decision. But God creates a boundary that will exist for each individual. So, for example, a certain individual may be limited to the sphere of number 1, and another person to the sphere of number 2, and another person to the sphere of number 3. What does this mean? This means that while God knows every possible decision you can make, He gives us free choice within the area that He has allocated to us. Now, my allocation may be area 1, which means in terms of my application of my free will, there may be a certain minimum wealth I could achieve or a certain maximum wealth I can achieve, bounded by the boundaries that God has destined for me. So I may find that no matter how hard I work, I cannot achieve as much wealth as, say, person number 3, because his maximum potential is much higher than mine. But I may, in fact, at the end of my life, achieve more wealth than person number 3, because he did not exercise his full potential by exercising the correct decisions in his life, by applying himself in his life. So all of us have free will within the limitations that God has given us. So God knows everything, but He has left that area that is our domain upon our free will. And God has to give us this area of free will, otherwise He cannot test us. We cannot be tested if everything is predetermined. So while God knows everything, we have limited free will within the range that God has given us. Now the question that we are faced with, okay, I've got limited time on earth. I'm going to be tested by God. I need to prove my worthiness of a place in paradise. How is God going to test me? Is He going to test me on my wealth? Is He going to test me on my beauty? Is He going to test me on my knowledge? God makes it easy for us. He even tells us what criteria He's going to test us on. So in other words, in all these spheres of wealth and beauty and physical attributes, He has limited us. And because He has limited us, one person may achieve less wealth than another. And God has leveled the playing fields by saying, don't worry. You are not going to be tested in terms of your decisions in that particular field. So you're not going to be tested in terms of the wealth you end up getting. You're not going to be tested in terms of the beauty you get. You're not going to be tested in terms of the knowledge you acquire. I am only going to test you in terms of your piety. You're getting close to God. And if we look at this as being the branch of piety, God makes an exception in the field of piety. He does not give us a limitation. He opens up the entire field of piety to every human being. So while God knows every possible decision we could make, He leaves it open to us to reach the lowest of the low, the worst of the worst, or to rise to the highest of the highest. So how much of wealth we get and how much of beauty we get is not important. What is important is how we use that wealth, how we use that beauty, how we use that strength to progress us along the pathway of piety. How we use it to bring us closer to God, because that is what God is going to measure us by. And in that way we realize that while God gave us wealth and beauty in different amounts, He's only done that in order to create the diversity in the world, and this diversity creates the opportunity for us to prove ourselves in terms of piety. So, to summarize, He's given us free will. He's limited our free will in lots of spheres only to create diversity in the world. But in the sphere that matters most, the only sphere in which He's going to test us, He does not limit us. And He leaves us open and says, you go, I'm only going to test you in terms of your piety. Use all the others to promote your piety. But one person may say, this is not fair. God has given him the potential to reach $1 million, and I'm only getting the maximum I can reach is 10 cents. How am I going to do the same amount of, gain the same amount of piety with my 10 cents? Well, God has His way. For example, if you give 5 cents of your 10 cents in the path of bringing you closer to God, you have given 50% of your total wealth. Whereas the other person who have given R1,000,000 of his R1,000,000,000, he's only given 1 out of 1,000,000,000, that's 1,000th. 0.01%. So, you would still acquire a higher ranking in piety than the other person because you had done a much more greater contribution in terms of what you had. So we will never be disadvantaged. In summary, we have looked at the fact that there is no doubt that God exists. He has given us the signs for us who have eyes to see the signs and to read it. There is only one God. He's created the world for us and created us on the world in order to prove our worthiness of a place in paradise. He tests us at the end in terms of how we have utilized what we have been given to get close to God. He has given us references to help us. And there are 2 critical references. One is the teachings of God, which help us to understand God and bring us closer to God. But we have also another. And this is the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. And this is something I need to spend a little bit of time talking about. There is a lot of controversy surrounding this book. There are lots of people that claim it is a fabrication, it is a fake. It was written specifically to insult the Jewish people. It's an anti-Semitic book in order to discredit the Jews. That may be so. I'm not getting into that argument whether it is or is not a authentic book or not.